Hello, and welcome back to Baby Alice's Stories. We now return to The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood by Howard Pyle. Robin Hood and Tinker. Now it was told before how £200 was set upon Robin Hood's head, and how the Sheriff of Nottingham swore that he himself would seize Robin, both because he would fain have the £200, and because the slain man was a kinsman of his own. Now the sheriff did not yet know what a force Robin had about him in Sherwood, but thought that he might serve a warrant for his arrest, as he could upon any other man that had broken the laws. Therefore he offered 80 golden angels to anyone who would serve this warrant. But men of Nottingham town knew more of Robin Hood and his doings than the sheriff did, and many laughed to think of serving a warrant upon the bold outlaw, knowing well that all they would get for such service would be cracked crowns, so that no one came forward to take the matter in hand. Thus a fortnight passed, in which time none came forward to do the sheriff's business. Then said he, "A right good reward have I offered to whosoever would serve my warrant upon Robin Hood, and I marvel that no one has come to undertake the task." Then one of his men who was near him said, "Good master, thou wottest not the force that Robin Hood was about him, and how little he cares for warrant of king or sheriff. Truly, no one likes to go on this service for fear of cracked crowns and broken bones." "Then I hold all Nottingham men to be cowards," said the sheriff. "And let me see the man in all Nottinghamshire that dare disobey the warrant of our sovereign Lord King Harry, for by the shrine of Saint Edmund I will hang him 40 cubits high. But if no man in Nottingham dare win 80 angels, I will send elsewhere, for there should be men of metal somewhere in this land." Then he called up a messenger, in whom he placed great trust, and bade him saddle his horse, and make ready to go to Lincoln town, to see whether he could find anyone there that would do his bidding and win the reward. So that same morning the messenger started forth upon his errand. Bright shone the sun upon the dusty highway that led from Nottingham to Lincoln, stretching away all white over hill and dale. Dusty was the highway, and dusty the throat of the messenger, so that his heart was glad when he saw before him the sign of the Blue Boar Inn. When somewhat more than half his journey was done, the inn looked fair to his eyes, and the shade of the oak trees that stood around it seemed cool and pleasant. So he alighted from his horse to rest himself for a time, calling for a pot of ale to refresh his thirsty throat. Then he saw a party of right jovial fellows seated beneath the spreading oak that shaded the green sward in front of the door. There was a tinker, 2 barefoot friars, and a party of 6 of the king's foresters, all clad in Lincoln green, and all of them were quaffing humming ale. and singing merry ballads of the good old times. Loud laughed the foresters as jests were bandied about between the singing, and louder laughed the friars, for they were lusty men with beards that curled like the wool of black rams. But loudest of all laughed the tinker, and he sang more sweetly than any of the rest. His bag and his hammer hung upon a twig of the oak tree, and near by leaned his good stout cudgel, as thick as his wrist, and knotted at the end. "Come," cried one of the foresters to the tired messenger, "come join us for this shot. Ho, landlord, bring a fresh pot of ale for each man." The messenger was glad enough to sit down along with the others who were there, for his limbs were weary and the ale was good. "Now, what news bearest thou so fast?" quoth one, "and whither ridest thou today?" The messenger was a chatty soul, and loved a bit of gossip dearly. Besides, the pot of ale warmed his heart, so that, settling himself in an easy corner of the inn bench, while the host leaned upon the doorway and the hostess stood with her hands beneath her apron, he unfolded his budget of news with great comfort. He told all from the very first, how Robin Hood had slain the forester, and how he had ridden in the greenwood to escape the law. How that he lived therein, all against the law, God wot, slaying his majesty's deer, and levying toll on fat abbot, knight, and esquire, so that none dare travel even on broad Watling Street or the Force Way for fear of him. How that the sheriff had a mind to serve the king's warrant upon this same rogue, though little would he mind warrant of either king or sheriff, for he was far from being a law-abiding man. Then he told how none could be found in all Nottingham town to serve this warrant, for fear of cracked pates and broken bones, and how that he, the messenger, was now upon his way to Lincoln town to find of what metal the Lincoln men might be. "Now come I, forsooth, from good Banbury town," said the jolly tinker, "and no one nigh Nottingham nor Sherwood either, and that be the mark. Can hold cudgel with my grip. Why, lads, did I not meet that mad wag Simon of Ely, even at the famous fair at Hertford town, and beat him in the ring at that place before Sir Robert of Leslie and his lady? This same Robin Hood, of whom I wot I never heard before, is a right merry blade. But gin he be strong? Am I not stronger? And gin he be sly? Am I not slyer? Now by the bright eyes of Nan o' the Mill, and by mine own name, and that's what o' the Crabstaff, and by my own mother's son, and that's myself, will I, even I, what o' the Crabstaff, meet this same sturdy rogue, and gin he mind not the seal of our glorious sovereign King Harry, and the warrant of the good Sheriff of Nottinghamshire, I will so bruise, beat, and bemaul his pate, that he shall never move finger or toe again. Hear ye that, bully boys? Now art thou the man for my farthing, cried the messenger, and back thou goest with me to Nottingham town. Nay, quoth the tinker, shaking his own head slowly from side to side, I go with no man, Gin, it be not with mine own free will.
Nay, nay, said the messenger. No man is there in Nottinghamshire could make thee go against thy will, thou brave fellow.
Aye, that be I brave, said the tinker.
Aye, marry, said the messenger. Thou art a brave lad, but our good sheriff hath offered 80 angels of bright gold to whosoever shall serve the warrant upon Robin Hood, though little good will it do.
Then I will go with thee, lad. But do but wait till I get my bag and hammer and my cudgel. Aye, let me but meet this same Robin Hood, and let me see whether he will not mind the king's warrant.
So after having paid their score, the messenger, with the tinker striding beside his nag, started back to Nottingham again. One bright morning soon after this time, Robin Hood started off to Nottingham town to find what was a-doing there. Walking merrily along the roadside where the grass was sweet with daisies, his eyes wandering and his thoughts also, his bugle horn hung at his hip, and his bow and arrows at his back, while in his hand he bore a good stout oaken staff, which he twirled with his fingers as he strolled along. And thus he walked down a shady lane. He saw a tinker coming, trolling a merry song as he drew nigh. On his back hung his bag and his hammer, and in his hand he carried a right stout crabstaff, full 6 feet long, and thus he sang. In peace God time when hound to horn gives ears till buck be killed, and little lads with pipes of corn sit keeping beasts of field.
Halloa, good friend, cried Robin. I went to gather strawberries. Halloa, cried Robin again, by woods and groves full fair. Halloa, art thou deaf, man? Good friend, say I. And who art thou dost so boldly check a fair song? Quoth the tinker, stopping in his singing. Halloa, shine own self, whether thou be good friend or no. But let me tell thee, thou stout fellow, gin thou be a good friend, it were well for us both. But gin thou be no good friend, it were ill for thee. And whence comest thou, my lusty blade? Quoth Robin. I come from Banbury, answered the tinker. Alas, quoth Robin, I hear there is sad news this merry morn. Ha! Is it indeed so? Cried the tinker eagerly. Prithee, tell it speedily, for I am a tinker by trade, as thou seest. And as I am in my trade, I am greedy for news, even as a priest is greedy for farthings. Well then, quoth Robin, list thou, and I will tell, but bear thyself up bravely, for the news is sad, I wot. Thus it is. I hear that 2 tinkers are in the stocks for drinking ale and beer. Now a murrain seize thee in thy news, thou scurvy dog, quoth the tinker, for thou speakest but ill of good men. But sad news it is indeed, gin there be 2 stout fellows in the stocks. Nay, said Robin, thou hast missed the mark, and dost but weep for the wrong so. The sadness of the news layeth in that there be but 2 in the stocks, for the others do roam the country at large. Now by the pewter of platter of St. Dunstan, cried the tinker, I have a good part of a mind to baste thy hide for thine ill jest. But gin men be put in the stocks for drinking ale and beer. I trow thou wouldest not lose thy part.
Loud laughed Robin and cried. Now well taken, Tinker, well taken. Why, thy wits are like beer, and do froth up most when they grow sour. But right art thou, man, for I love ale and beer right well. Therefore come straight away with me hard by to the sign of the Blue Boar, and if thou drinkest as thou appearest, and I wot thou wilt not beguile thy looks, I will drench thy throat with as good home brewed as ever was tapped in all broad Nottinghamshire. Now, by my faith, said the tinker, thou art a right good fellow in spite of thy scurvy jests. I love thee, my sweet chuck, and gin I got not with thee to that same Blue Boar thou mayest call me a heathen. Tell me thy news, good friend, I pray thee, quoth Robin, as they trudged along together. For tinkers, I ween, are all as full of news as an egg of meat. Now I love thee as my brother, my bully blade, said the tinker, else I would not tell thee my news, for sly am I, man, and I have in hand a grave undertaking that doth call for all my wits. For I come to seek a bold outlaw that men hereabouts call Robin Hood. Within my pouch I have a warrant, all fairly written out on parchment, forsooth, with a great red seal for to make it lawful. Could I but meet the same Robin Hood, I would serve it upon his dainty body, and if he minded it not, I would beat him till every one of his ribs would cry, Amen. But thou livest hereabouts. Mayhap thou knowest Robin Hood thyself, good fellow? Ay, marry, that I do somewhat, quoth Robin, and I have seen him this very morn. But, tinker, men say that he is but a sad, sly thief. Thou hadst better watch thy warrant, man, or else he may steal it out of thy very pouch. Let him but try, cried the tinker. Sly may he be, but sly am I too. I would I had him here now, man to man. And he made his heavy cudgel to spin again. But what manner of man is he, lad? Much like myself, said Robin, laughing. And in height and build and age nigh the same, and he hath blue eyes too. Nay, quoth the tinker, thou art but a green youth. I thought him to be a great bearded man. Nottingham men feared him so. Truly, he is not so old nor so stout as thou art, said Robin. But men do call him a right deft hand at quarterstaff. That may be, said the tinker right sturdily, but I am more deft than he, for did I not overcome Simon of Ely in a fair bout in the ring at Hertford town? But if thou knowest him, my jolly blade, wilt thou go with me and bring me to him? 80 bright angels hath the sheriff promised me if I serve the warrant upon the knave's body, and 10 of them will I give to thee if thou showest me him. Ay, that will I, quoth Robin. But show me thy warrant, man, until I see whether it be good or no. That will I not do, even to my own brother, answered the tinker. No man shall see my warrant till I serve it upon yon fellow's own body. So be it, quoth Robin, and thou show it not to me, I know not to whom thou wilt show it. But here we are at the sign of the Blue Boar, so let us in and taste his brown October. No sweeter inn could be found in all Nottinghamshire than that of the Blue Boar. None had such lovely trees standing around, or was so covered with trailing clematis and sweet woodbine. None had such good beer and such humming ale, nor in winter time, when the north wind howled and snow drifted around the hedges, was there to be found elsewhere such a roaring fire ablaze, such a roaring fire as blazed upon the hearth of the Blue Boar. At such times might be found a goodly company of yeomen or country folk seated around the blazing hearth, bandying merry jests while roasted crabs bobbed in bowls of ale upon the hearthstone. Crabs, freshly picked apples. Well known was the inn to Robin Hood and his band, for there had he and such merry companions as Little John or Will Stutely, or young David of Doncaster, often gathered when all the forest was filled with snow. As for mine host, he knew how to keep a still tongue in his head, and to swallow his words before they passed his teeth, for he knew very well which side of his bread was spread with butter. For Robin and his band were the best of customers, and paid their scores without having them chalked up behind the door. So now, when Robin Hood and the tinker came thereto, and called aloud for 2 great pots of ale, none would have known from look or speech that the host had ever set eyes upon the outlaw before. "Bid thou here," quoth Robin to the tinker, "while I go and see that mine host draweth ale from the right butt. For he hath good October, I know, and that brewed by Withold of Tamworth." So saying, he went within and whispered to the host to add a measure of Flemish strong waters to the good English ale, which the latter did, and brought it to them. "By Our Lady," said the tinker, after a long draught of the ale, "yon same Withold of Tamworth, a right good Saxon name too, I would have thee know, breweth the most humming ale that e'er passed the lips of Wat o' the Crabstaff." "Drink, man, drink," cried Robin, only wetting his own lips meanwhile. "Ho, landlord, bring my friend another pot of the same. And now for a song, my jolly blade." "Aye, that will I give thee a song, my lovely fellow," quoth the tinker, "for I never tasted such ale in all my days before. By Our Lady, it doth make my head hum even now. Hey, dame hostess, come listen, and thou wouldest hear a song, and thou too, thou bonny lass, for never sing I so well as when bright eyes do look upon me the while." Then he sang an ancient ballad of the time of good King Arthur, called The Marriage of Sir Gawain.
Gawain.
Which you may sometime read yourself in stout English of early times. And as he sang, all listened to that noble tale of noble knight, and his sacrifice to his king. But long before the tinker came to the last verse, his tongue began to trip and his head to spin, because of the strong waters mixed with the ale. First his tongue tripped, then it grew thick of sound, then his head wagged from side to side, until at last he fell asleep as though he never would waken again. Then Robin Hood laughed aloud, and quickly took the warrant from out the tinker's pouch with his deft fingers. "Sly art thou, tinker," quoth he, "but not yet, I bow, art thou as sly as that same sly thief, Robin Hood." Then he called the host to him and said, "Here, good man, are 10 broad shillings for the entertainment thou hast given us this day. See that thou takest good care of thy fair guest here, and when he wakes, thou mayest again charge him 10 shillings also, if he hath it not. And if he hath it not, thou mayest take his bag and hammer, and even his coat in payment. Thus do I punish those that come into the greenwood to deal dole to me. As for thine own self, never knew I landlord, yet that would not charge twice, and he could. At this the host smiled slyly, as though saying to himself the rustic saw, Teach a magpie to suck eggs. The tinker slept until the afternoon drew to a close, and the shadows grew long beside the woodland edge. Then he awoke. First he looked up, then he looked down, then he looked east, then he looked west, for he was gathering his wits together, like barley straws blown apart by the wind. First he thought of his merry companion, but he was gone. Then he thought of his stout crabstaff, and that he had within his hand. Then of his warrant, and of the 80 angels he was to gain for serving it upon Robin Hood. He thrust his hand into his pouch, but not a scrap nor a farthing was there. Then he sprang to his feet in a rage. Ho, landlord, cried he, whither hath that knave gone that was with me but now? What knave meaneth, your worship? Quoth the landlord, calling the tinker workshop to soothe him, as a man would pour oil upon angry water. I saw no knave with your worship, for I swear no man would dare call that man knave so nigh to Sherwood Forest. A right stout yeoman I saw with your worship, but I thought that your worship knew him, for few there be about here that pass him by and know him not. Now how should I know that ne'er have squealed in your sty? Know all the swine therein? Who was he then, and thou knowest him so well? Why, yon same in right stout fellow, whom men hereabouts do call Robin Hood, which same... Now, by a lady, cried the tinker hastily, and in a deep voice like an angry bull, thou didst see me come into thine inn, I, a staunch, honest craftsman, and never told me who my company was, well knowing thine own self who he was. Now I have a right round piece of a mind to crack thy knave's pate for thee. Then he took up his cudgel and looked at the landlord as though he would smite him where he stood. Nay, cried the host, throwing up his elbow, for he feared the blow. How knew I that thou knewest him not? Well, and truly thankful mayest thou be, quoth the tinker, that I be a patient man, and so do spare thy bald crown. Else wouldest thou ne'er cheat customer again. But as for this same knave Robin Hood, I go straight away to seek him, and if I do not score his knave's plate, cut my staff into faggots and call me a woman. So saying, he gathered himself together to depart. Nay, quoth the landlord, standing in front of him and holding out his arms like a gooseherd driving his flock, for money made him bold. Thou goest not till thou hast paid me my score. But did not he pay thee? Not so much as 1 farthing, and 10 good shillings worth of ale have ye drunk this day. Nay, I say, thou goest not away without paying me, else shall our good sheriff know of it. But not have I to pay thee with, good fellow, quoth the tinker. Good fellow, not me, said the landlord. Good fellow am I not when it cometh to lose 10 shillings. Pay me that thou owest me in broad money, or else leave thy coat and bag and hammer. Yet I wot they are not worth 10 shillings, and I shall lose thereby. Nay, an thou stirrest, I have a great dog within, and I will loose him upon thee. Make and open thou the door, and let forth Brian, if this fellow stirs 1 step. Nay, quoth the tinker, for by roaming the country he had learned what dogs were. Take thou what thou wilt have, and let me depart in peace, and may a million go with thee.
and may a murrain go with thee.
Murrain.
Murrain, an infectious disease, especially babesiosis, affecting cattle or other animals. Murrain, a plague, epidemic, or crop blight. And may a murrain go with thee. But, O landlord, when I catch yon scurvy varlet, I swear he shall pay full with usury. I swear he shall pay full with usury, for that he hath had. So saying, he strode away toward the forest, talking to himself, while the landlord and his worthy dame and Macon stood looking after him, and laughed when he had fairly gone. Robin and I strip yon ass of his pack main neatly, quoth the landlord. Now it happened about this time that Robin Hood was going through the forest to Forsway to see what was to be seen there, for the moon was full, and the night gave promise of being bright. In his hands he carried his stout oaken staff, and at his side hung his bugle horn. As thus he walked up a forest path, whistling. Down another path came the tinkler, muttering to himself, and shaking his head like an angry bull. And so, at a sudden bend, they met sharply face to face. Each stood still for a time, and then Robin spoke. "Hello, my sweet bird," said he, laughing merrily. "How likest thou thine ale? Wilt not sing to me another song?" The tinker said nothing at first, but stood looking at Robin with a grim face. "Now," quoth he at last, "I am right glad I have met thee, and if I do not rattle thy bones within thy hide this day, I give thee leave to put thy foot upon my neck." "With all my heart," cried merry Robin. "Rattle my bones, and thou canst." So saying, he gripped his staff and threw himself upon his guard. Then the tinker spat upon his hands, and grasping his staff, came straight at the other. He struck two or three blows, but soon found that he had met his match, for Robin warded and parried all of them, and before the tinker thought, he gave him a rap upon his ribs in return. At this Robin laughed aloud, and the tinker grew more angry than ever, and smote again with all his might and main. Again Robin warded two of the strokes, but at the third his staff broke beneath the mighty blows of the tinker. "Now I'll betide thee, traitor staff," cried Robin as it fell from his hands. "A foul stick art thou to serve me thus in mine hour of need." "Now yield thee," quoth the tinker, "for thou art my captive, and if thou do not, I will beat thy pate to a pudding." To this Robin Hood made no answer, but clapping his horn to his lips, he blew 3 blasts, loud and clear. "Aye," quoth the tinker, "blow thou mayest, but go thou must with me to Nottingham town, for the sheriff would fain see thee there. Now wilt thou yield thee, or shall I have to break thy pretty head?" "And I must drink sour ale, I must," quoth Robin, "but never have I yielded me to man before, and that without wound or mark upon my body, nor when I bethink me will I yield now. Ho, my merry men, come quickly." Then from out the forest leaped Little John and 6 stout yeomen clad in Lincoln green. "How now, good master?" cried Little John. "What need hast thou that thou dost wind thy horn so loudly?" "There stands a tinker," quoth Robin, "that would fain take me to Nottingham, there to hang upon the gallows tree." "Then shall he himself hang forthwith," cried Little John,
and he and the others made at the tinker to seize him. "Nay, touch him not," said Robin, "for a right stout man is he. A metal man he is by trade, and a mettled man by nature. Moreover, he doth sing a lovely ballad. Say, good fellow, wilt thou join my merry men all? 3 suits of Lincoln green shalt thou have a year, besides 40 marks in fee. Thou shalt share all with us, and lead a right merry life in the greenwood. For cares have we not, and misfortune cometh not upon us within the sweet shades of Sherwood. But we shoot the dun deer, and feed upon venison and sweet oaten cakes, and curds and honey. Wilt thou come with me?" "Ay, marry, will I join with you all," quoth the tinker, "for I love a merry life, and I love thee, good master, though thou didst thwack my ribs and cheat me into the bargain. Fain am I to own thou art both a stouter and a slyer man than I, so I will obey thee, and be thine own true servant." So all turned their steps to the forest depths, where the tinker was to live henceforth. For many a day he sang ballads to the band, until the famous Allan a Dale joined them, before whose sweet voice all others seemed as harsh as a raven's. But of him we will learn hereafter. The shooting match at Nottingham town. Then the sheriff was very wroth because of this failure to take jolly Robin, for it came to his ears, as ill news always does, that the people laughed at him and made a jest of his thinking to serve a warrant upon such a one as the bold outlaw. And a man hates nothing so much as being made a jest of. So he said, "Our gracious Lord and Sovereign King himself shall know of this, and how his laws are perverted and despised by this band of rebel outlaws. As for yon traitor tinker, him will I hang, if I catch him upon the very highest gallows tree in all Nottinghamshire." Then he bade all his servants and retainers to make ready to go to London town, to see and speak with the king. At this there was bustling at the sheriff's castle, and men ran hither and thither upon this business and upon that, while the forge fires of Nottingham glowed red far into the night like twinkling stars, for all the smiths of the town were busy making or mending armor for the sheriff's troop of escort. For 2 days this labor lasted. Then on the 3rd all was ready for the journey. So forth they started into the bright sunlight from Nottingham town to Force Way, and thence to Watling Street. And so they journeyed for 2 days, until they saw at last the spires and towers of great London town, and many folks stopped. As they journeyed along and gazed at the show they made riding along the highways with their flashing armor and gay plumes and trappings. In London, King Henry and his fair Queen Eleanor held their court, gay with ladies in silks and satins, and velvets and cloth of gold, and also brave knights and gallant courtiers. Thither came the sheriff, and was shown into the king's presence. "A boon, a boon, a boon, a boon," quoth he, as he knelt upon the ground. "Now what wouldest thou have?" said the king. "Let us hear what may be thy desires." "Oh, good my lord and sovereign," spake the sheriff, "in Sherwood Forest, in our own good shire of Nottingham, liveth a bold outlaw, whose name is Robin Hood." "In good sooth," said the king, "his doings have reached even our own royal ears. He is a saucy, rebellious varlet, yet I am fain to own a right merry soul withal. But hearken, O my most gracious sovereign," said the sheriff. "I sent a warrant to him with thine own royal seal attached by a right lusty knave, but he beat the messenger and stole the warrant, and he killeth thy deer and robbeth thy own liege subjects, even upon the great highways." "Why, how now?" quoth the king wrathfully. "What wouldest thou have me do? Comest thou not to me with a great array of men-at-arms and retainers, and yet art not able to take a single band of lusty knaves without armour on breast in thine own county? What wouldest thou have me do? Art thou not my sheriff? Art not my laws in force in Nottinghamshire? Canst thou not take thine own course against those that break the laws or do any injury to thee or thine? Go get thee gone and think well. Devise some plan of thine own, but trouble me no further. But look well to it, Master Sheriff, for I will have my laws obeyed by all men within my kingdom. And if thou art not able to enforce them, thou art no sheriff for me. So look well to thyself, I say, or ill may befall thee as well as all the thieving knaves in Nottinghamshire. When the flood cometh, it sweepeth away grain as well as chaff." Then the sheriff turned away with a sore and troubled heart, and sadly he rued his fine show of retainers, for he saw that the king was very angry. He saw that the king was angry because he had so many men about him, and yet could not enforce the laws. So as they all rode slowly back to Nottingham, the sheriff was thoughtful and full of care. Not a word did he speak to anyone, and no one of his men spoke to him, but all the time he was busy devising some plan to take Robin Hood. "Aha!" cried he suddenly, smiting his hand upon his thigh. "I have it now. Ride on, my merry men all, and let us get back to Nottingham town as speedily as we may. And mark well my words, before a fortnight is past, that evil knave Robin Hood will be safely clapped into Nottingham gaol." Gaol.
Jail.
Jail. Gaol, jail. But what was the sheriff's plan? A usurer takes usurer.
Usurer.
Usurer, a person who lends money at reasonably high rates of interest. Extortionate moneylender. A usurer takes each one of a bag of silver angels. Feeling each coin to find whether it be clipped or not. So the sheriff, as all rode slowly and sadly back toward Nottingham, took up thought after thought in turn, feeling around the edges of each, but finding in every one some flaw. At last he thought of the daring soul of jolly Robin, and how, as he the sheriff knew, He often came even within the walls of Nottingham. Now, thought the sheriff, could I but persuade Robin nigh to Nottingham town, so that I could find him, I warrant I would lay hands upon him so stoutly that he would never get away again. Then of a sudden it came to him like a flash, that were he to proclaim a great shooting match, and offer some grand prize, Robin Hood might be over-persuaded by his spirit to come to the butts, and it was this thought which caused him to cry, "Aha!" and smite his palm upon his thigh. As soon as he had returned safely to Nottingham, he sent messengers north and south, and east and west, to proclaim through town, hamlet, and countryside this grand shooting match, and everyone was bidden that could draw a long bow, and the prize was to be an arrow of pure beaten gold. When Robin Hood first heard the news of this, he was in Lincoln town, and hastening back to Sherwood Forest, he soon called all his merry men about him, and spoke to them thus: "Now hearken, my merry men all, to the news that I have brought from Lincoln town today. Our friend the Sheriff of Nottingham hath proclaimed a shooting match, and hath sent messengers to tell of it through all the countryside, and the prize is to be a bright golden arrow. Now I fain would have one of us win it, both because of the fairness of the prize, and because our sweet friend the sheriff hath offered it. So we will take our bows and shafts, and go there to shoot, for I know right well that merriment will be a-going. What say ye, lads?" Then young David of Doncaster spoke up and said, "Now listen, I pray thee, good master, unto what I say. I have come straight from our friend Edom o' the Blue Boar, and there I heard the full news of this same match. But master, I know from him, and he got it from the sheriff's man, Ralph o' the Scar, that this same knavish sheriff hath but laid a trap for thee in this shooting match, and wishes nothing so much as to see thee there. So go not, master, for I know right well he doth seek to beguile thee. Beguile, charm or enchant someone, sometimes in a deceptive way. He doth seek to beguile thee, but stay within the greenwood, lest we all meet dole and woe." "Now," quoth Robin, "thou art a wise lad, and keepest thine ears open and thy mouth shut, as becometh a wise and crafty woodsman. But shall we let it be said that the Sheriff of Nottingham did cow bold Robin Hood, and serve score as fair archers as are in all merry England? Nay, good David, what thou tellest me maketh me to desire the prize even more than I else should do. But what saith our good gossip Swanthold? Is it not a hasty man burneth his mouth, and the fool that keepeth his eye shut falleth into the pit? Thus he says, truly, therefore we must meet guile with guile. Now some of you clothe yourselves as curtal friars, and some as rustic peasants, and some as tinkers or as beggars, but see that each man taketh a good bow or broadsword, in case need should arise. As for myself, I will shoot for this same golden arrow, and should I win it, we will hang it to the branches of our good greenwood tree for the joy of all the band. How like you the plan, my merry men all?" Then, "Good, good," cried all the band right heartily. A fair sight was Nottingham town on the day of the shooting match. All along upon the green meadow beneath the town wall stretched a row of benches, one above the other, which were for knight and lady, squire and dame, and rich burghers, and their wives. For none but those of rank and quality were to sit there. At the end of the range near the target was a raised seat, bedecked with ribbons and scarves, and garlands of flowers, for the Sheriff of Nottingham and his dame. The range was 20 paces broad. At one end stood the target, at the other a tent of stripped canvas, from the pole of which fluttered many-coloured flags and streamers. In this booth were casks of ale, free to be broached by any of the archers who might wish to quench their thirst. Across the range from where the seats for the better folk were raised was a railing to keep the poorer people from crowding in front of the target. Already, while it was early, the benches were beginning to fill with people of quality, who kept constantly arriving in little carts or upon palfreys that curveted gaily to the merry tinkle of silver bells at bridle reins. With these came also the poorer folk, who sat or lay upon the green grass near the railing that kept them from off the range. In the great tent the archers were gathering by twos and threes, some talking loudly of the fair shots each man had made in his day, some looking well to their bows, drawing a string betwixt the fingers to see that there was no fray upon it, or inspecting arrows, shutting one eye and peering down a shaft to see that it was not wrapped, but straight and true, for neither bow nor shaft should fail at such a time and for such a prize. And never was such a company of yeomen as were gathered at Nottingham town that day, for the very best archers of merry England had come to this shooting match. There was Gill o' the Red Cap, the sheriff's own head archer, and Dickon Cruikshank of Lincoln town, and Adam o' the Dell, a man of Tamworth, of 80 years and more, yet hale and lusty still, who in his time had shot in the famous match at Woodstock, and had there beaten that renowned archer, Climb o' the Clove. And many more famous men of the long bow were there, whose names have been handed down to us in goodly ballads of the olden time. But now all the benches were filled with guests, lord and lady, burgher and dame, when at last the sheriff himself came with his lady, he riding with stately mane upon his milk-white horse, and she upon her brown filly. Upon his head he wore a purple velvet cap, and purple velvet was his robe, all trimmed about with rich ermine. His jerkin and hose were of sea-green silk, and his shoes of black velvet. The pointed toes fastened to his garters with golden chains. A golden chain hung about his neck, and at his collar was a great carbuncle set in red gold. His lady was dressed in blue velvet, all trimmed with swan's down. So they made a gallant sight as they rode along side by side, and all the people shouted from where they crowded across the space from the gentlefolk. So the sheriff and his lady came to their place, where men-at-arms with hauberk and spear stood about, waiting for them. Then when the sheriff and his dame had sat down, he bade his herald wind upon his silver horn, who thereupon sounded 3 blasts that came echoing cheerily back from the grey walls of Nottingham. Then the archers stepped forth to their places, while all the folk shouted with a mighty voice, each man calling upon his favourite yeoman. Red Cap, cried someone. Cruikshank, cried others. Hey, for William O'Leslie, shouted others yet again, while ladies waved silken scarves to urge each yeoman to do his best. Then the herald stood forth and loudly proclaimed the rules of the game as follows. Shoot each man from yon mark, which is 70 yards and 10 from the target. 1 arrow shooteth each man first, and from all the archers shall the 10 that shooteth the fairest shafts be chosen for to shoot again. 2 arrows shooteth each man of these 10, then shall the 3 that shoot the fairest shafts be chosen for to shoot again. 3 arrows shooteth each man of those 3, and to him that shooteth the fairest shafts shall the prize be given. Then the sheriff leaned forward, looking keenly among the press of archers to find whether Robin Hood was among them. But no one was there, clad in Lincoln green, such as was worn by Robin and his bands. Nevertheless, said the sheriff to himself, he may still be there, and I miss him among the crowd of other men. But let me see when but 10 men shoot, for I wot he will be among the 10, or I know him not.
And now the archers shot, each man in turn, and the good folk never saw such archery as was done that day. 6 arrows were within the clout, 4 within the black, and only 2 smote the outer ring, so that when the last arrow sped and struck the target, all the people shouted aloud. For it was noble shooting. And now but 10 men were left of all those that had shot before. And of these 10, 6 were famous throughout the land, and most of the folk gathered there knew them. These 6 men were Gilbert o' the Red Cap, Gilbert o' the Red Cap, Adam o' the Dell, Dickon Cruikshank, William O'Leslie, Hubert O'Cloud, and Swithin o' Hertford. 2 others were yeomen of merry Yorkshire. Another was a tall stranger in blue, who said he came from London town, and the last was a tattered stranger in scarlet, who wore a patch over one eye. Now, quoth the sheriff to a man-at-arms who stood near him, seest thou Robin Hood among those 10? Nay, that do I not, your worship, answered the man. 6 of them I know right well. Of those Yorkshire yeomen, one is too tall, and the other too short for that bold knave. Robin's beard is as yellow as gold, while yon tattered beggar in scarlet hath a beard of brown, besides being blind of one eye. As for the stranger in blue, Robin's shoulders, I ween, are 3 inches broader than his. Then, quoth the sheriff, smiting his thigh angrily, yon knave is a coward, as well as a rogue, and dare not show his face among good men and true. Then, after they had rested a short time, those 10 stout men stepped forth to shoot again. Each man shot 2 arrows, and as they shot, not a word was spoken, but all the crowd watched with scarce a breath of sound. But when the last had shot his arrow, another great shout arose, while many cast their caps aloft for joy of such marvellous shooting. Now, by our gracious lady fair, quoth old Sir Amyas o' the Dell, who bode with 80 years and more, sat near the sheriff. Ne'er saw I such archery in all my life before. Yet have I seen the best hands at the longbow for 60 years and more. And now but 3 men were left of all those that had shot before. One was Gil o' the Red Cap, one the tattered stranger in scarlet, and one Adam o' the Dell of Tamworth town. Then all the people called aloud, crying some, "Ho for Gilbert o' the Red Cap!" and some, "Hey for stout Adam o' Tamworth!" But not a single man in the crowd called upon the stranger in scarlet. "Now shoot thou well, Gilbert," cried the sheriff, "and if thine be the best shaft, 50 broad silver pennies will I give to thee beside the prize." "Truly, I will do my best," quoth Gilbert right sturdily. "A man cannot do aught but his best, but that will I strive to do this day." So saying, he drew forth a fair, smooth arrow with a broad feather, and fitted it deftly to the string. Then, drawing his bow with care, he sped the shaft. Straight flew the arrow, and lit fairly in the clout, a finger's breadth from the centre. "Ah, Gilbert! Ah, Gilbert!" shouted all the crowd, and "Now by my faith," cried the sheriff, smiting his hands together, "that is a shrewd shot." Then the tattered stranger stepped forth, and all the people laughed as they saw a yellow patch that showed beneath his arm when he raised his elbow to shoot, and also to see him aim with but one eye. He drew the good yew bow quickly, and quickly loosened the shaft. So short was the time that no man could draw breath betwixt the drawing and the shooting. Yet his arrow lodged nearer the centre than the other by twice the length of a barleycorn. "Now, by all the saints in paradise," cried the sheriff, "that is a lovely shaft, in very truth." Then Adam o' the Dell shot, carefully and cautiously, and his arrow lodged close beside the stranger's. Then, after a short space, they all 3 shot again. And once more each arrow lodged within the clout. But this time Adam o' the Dells was farthest from the centre, and again the tattered stranger's shot was the best. Then, after another time of rest, they all shot for the 3rd time. This time Gilbert took great heed to his aim, keenly measuring the distance and shooting with shrewdest care. Straight flew the arrow, and all shouted till the very flags that waved in the breeze shook with the sound, and the rocks and daws flew clamouring about the roofs of the old grey tower. For the shaft had lodged close beside the spot that marked the very centre. "Well done, Gilbert, well done!" cried the sheriff right joyously. "Fain am I to believe the prize is thine, and right fairly won. Now, thou ragged knave, let me see thee shoot a better shaft than that." Naught spake the stranger, but took his place, while all was hushed, and no one spoke or even seemed to breathe. So great was the silence, for wonder what he would do. Meanwhile, also quite still stood the stranger, holding his bow in his hand, while one could count 5. Then he drew his trusty yew, holding it drawn but a moment, then loosed the string. Straight flew the arrow, and so true that it smote a grey goose feather from off Gilbert's shaft, which fell fluttering through the sunlit air as the stranger's arrow lodged close beside his
of the red cap, and in the very centre. No one spoke a word for a while, and no one shouted, but each man looked into his neighbour's face, amazed. "Nay," quoth old Adam o' the Dell presently, drawing a long breath and shaking his head as he spoke. 2 years and more have I shot shaft, and maybe not all times bad. But I shoot no more this day, for no man can match with yon stranger, whosoe'er he may be. Then he thrust his shaft into his quiver, rattling, and unstrung his bow without another word. Then the sheriff came down from his dais, and drew near, in all his skills and velvets, to where the tattered stranger stood leaning upon his stout bow, while the good folk crowded around to see the man who shot so wondrously well. "Here, good fellow," quoth the sheriff, "take thou the prize, and well and fairly hast thou won it, I bow. What may be thy name, and whence comest thou?" "Men do call me Jock o' Teviot Dale, and thence am I come," said the stranger. "Then, by Our Lady, Jock, art thou the fairest archer that e'er mine eyes beheld, and if thou wilt join my service, I will clothe thee with a better coat than that thou hast upon thy back. Thou shalt eat and drink of the best, and at every Christmas tide 80 marks shall be thy wage. I trow thou drawest better bow than that same coward knave Robin Hood, that dared not show his face here this day. Say, good fellow, wilt thou join my service?" "Nay, that will I not," quoth the stranger roughly. "I will be my own, and no man in all merry England shall be my master." "Then get thee gone, and a murrain seize thee," cried the sheriff, and his voice trembled with anger. "And by my faith and troth, I have a good part of a mind to have thee beaten for thine insolence." Then he turned upon his heel and strode away. It was a right motley company that gathered about the noble greenwood tree in Sherwood's depths that same day. 80 and more of barefoot friars were there, and some that looked like tinkers, and some that seemed to be sturdy beggars in rustic hinds. And seated upon a mossy couch was one all clad in tattered scarlet, with a patch over one eye, and in his hand he held the golden arrow that was the prize of the great shooting match. Then, amidst the noise of talking and laughter, he took the patch from his eye, and stripped away the scarlet rags from his body, and showed himself all clothed in fair Lincoln green, and quoth he, "Easy come these things away, but walnut stain cometh not so speedily from yellow hair." Then all laughed louder than before, for it was Robin Hood himself that had won the prize from the sheriff's very hands. Then all sat down to the woodland feast, and talked among themselves of the merry jest that had been played upon the sheriff, and of the adventures that had befallen each member of the band in his disguise. But when the feast was done, Robin Hood took Little John apart and said, "Truly am I vexed in my blood, for I heard the sheriff say today, 'Thou shootest better than that coward knave Robin Hood, that dared not show his face here this day. I would fain let him know who it was who won the golden arrow from out of his hand, and also that I am no coward such as he takes me to be.' Then Little John said, 'Good master, take thou me and Will Stutely, and we will send yon fat sheriff news of all this by a messenger, such as he doth not expect.' That day the sheriff sat at meat in the great hall of his house at Nottingham town. Long tables stood down the hall, at which sat men at arms, and household servants, and good stout villains, in all 80 and more. There they talked of the day's shooting as they ate their meat and quaffed their ale. The sheriff sat at the head of the table upon a raised seat under a canopy, and beside him sat his dame.
"By my troth," said he, "I did reckon full roundly that knave Robin Hood would be at the game today. I did not think that he was such a coward. But who could that saucy knave be who answered me to my beard so bravely? I wonder that I did not have him beaten, that there was something about him that spoke of other things than rags and tatters."
Then, even as he finished speaking, something fell rattling among the dishes in the table, while those that sat near started up wondering what it might be. After a while, one of the men-at-arms gathered courage enough to pick it up and bring it to the sheriff. Then everyone saw that it was a blunted grey goose shaft with a fine scroll about the thickness of a goose quill, tied near to its head. The sheriff opened the scroll and glanced at it, while the veins upon his forehead swelled, and his cheeks grew ruddy with rage as he read, for this was what he saw. "Now heaven bless thy grace this day, say all in sweet Sherwood, for thou didst give the prize away to merry Robin Hood." "Whence came this?" cried the sheriff in a mighty voice.
"Even through the window, your worship,"
quoth the man who had handed the shaft to him. Will Stutely rescued by his companions? Now when the sheriff found that neither law nor guile could overcome Robin Hood, he was much perplexed, and said to himself, "Fool that I am! Had I not told our king of Robin Hood, I would not have gotten myself into such a coil. But now I must either take him captive, or have wrath visited upon my head from his most gracious majesty. I have tried law, and I have tried guile, and I have failed in both. So I will try what may be done with might." Thus communing within himself, he called his constables together, and told them what was in his mind. "Now take ye each 4 men, all armed in proof," said he, "and get ye gone to the forest at different points, and lie in wait for this same Robin Hood. But if any constable finds too many men against him, let him sound a horn, and then let each band within hearing come with all speed and join the party that calls them. Thus, I think, shall we take this green-clad knave. Furthermore, to him that first meeteth with Robin Hood shall 100 pounds of silver money be given, if he be brought to me dead or alive, and to him that meeteth with any of his band shall 20 pounds be given, if such be brought to me dead or alive. So be ye bold, and be ye crafty." So thus they went in 80 companies of 5 to Sherwood Forest, to take Robin Hood, each constable wishing that he might be the one to find the bold outlaw, or at least one of his band. For 7 days and nights they hunted through the forest glades, but never saw so much as a single man in Lincoln Green, for tidings of all this had been brought to Robin Hood. For tidings of all this had been brought to Robin Hood by trusty Edom O' the Blue Boar. When he first heard the news, Robin said, "If the sheriff dare send force to meet force,
woe will it be for him and many a better man besides. For blood will flow, and there will be great trouble for all. But fain would I shun blood in battle, and fain would I not deal sorrow to womenfolk and wives, because good stout yeomen lose their lives. Once I slew a man, and never do I wish to slay a man again, for it is better for the soul to think thereon. So now we will abide silently in Sherwood Forest, so that it may be well for all. But should we be forced to defend ourselves, or any of our band, then let each man draw bow and brand with might and main. At this speech, many of the band shook their heads and said to themselves, Now the sheriff will think that we are cowards, and folk will scoff throughout the countryside, saying that we fear to meet these men. But they said nothing aloud, swallowing their words and doing as Robin bade them. Thus they hid in the depths of Sherwood Forest for 7 days and nights, and never showed their faces abroad in all that time. But early in the morning of the 8th day, Robin Hood called the band together and said, Now who will go and find what the sheriff's men are at by this time? For I know right well they will not bide forever within Sherwood shades. At this a great shout arose, and each man waved his bow aloft and cried that he might be the one to go. Then Robin's heart was proud when he looked around on his stout brave fellows, and he said, Brave and true are ye all, my merry men, and a right stout band of good fellows are ye. But ye cannot all go. So I will choose one from among you, and it shall be good Will Stutely, for he is as sly as e'er an old dog fox in Sherwood Forest. Then Will Stutely leaped high aloft and laughed loudly, clapping his hands for pure joy. Then he should have been chosen from among them all. Clapping his hands for pure joy that he should have been chosen from among them all. Now thanks, good master, quoth he, and if I bring not news of those knaves to thee, call me no more than sly Will Stutely. Then he clad himself in a friar's gown, and underneath the robe he hung a good broadsword in such a place that he could easily lay hands upon it. Thus clad, he set forth upon his quest, until he came to the verge of the forest, and so to the highway. He saw 2 bands of the sheriff's men, yet he turned neither to the right nor the left, but only drew his cowl the closer over his face, folding his hands as if in meditation. So at last he came to the sign of the Blue Boar. For, quoth he to himself, our good friend Edom will tell me all the news. At the sign of the Blue Boar he found a band of the sheriff's men drinking right lustily. So without speaking to anyone he sat down upon a distant bench, his staff in his hand, and his head bowed forward as though he were meditating. Thus he sat waiting until he might see the landlord apart, and Edom did not know him, but thought him to be some poor tired friar. So he let him sit without saying a word to him or molesting him, though he liked not the cloth. For, he said to himself, it is a hard heart that kicks the lame dog from off the sill. As Stutely sat thus, there came a great house cat and rubbed against his knee, raising his robe a palm's breadth high. Stutely pushed his robe down quickly again, but the constable who commanded the sheriff's men saw what had passed, and saw also fair Lincoln green beneath the friar's robe. He said nothing at the time, but communed within himself in this wise. yon is no friar of orders grey, and also I wot no honest yeoman goeth about in priest's garb, nor doth a thief go so for naught. Now I think in good sooth that is one of Robin Hood's own men."
So presently he said aloud,
"O holy father, wilt thou not take a good pot of March beer to slake thy thirsty soul withal?"
But Stutely shook his head silently, for he said to himself, "Maybe there be those here who know my voice." Then the constable said again,
"Whither goest thou, holy friar, upon this hot summer's day?"
"I go a pilgrim to Canterbury town," answered Will Stutely, speaking gruffly so that none might know his voice. Then the constable said for the third time,
"Now tell me, holy father, do pilgrims to Canterbury wear good Lincoln green beneath their robes? Ha! By my faith, I take thee to be some lusty thief, and perhaps one of Robin Hood's own band. Now, by Our Lady's grace, if thou movest hand or foot, I will run thee through the body with my sword."
Then he flashed forth his bright sword and leaped upon Will Stutely, thinking he would take him unaware. But Stutely had his own sword tightly held in his hand beneath his robe, so he drew it forth before the constable came upon him. Then the stout constable struck a mighty blow, but he struck no more in all that fight, for Stutely, parrying the blow right deftly, smote the constable back again with all his might. Then he would have escaped, but could not, for the other, all dizzy with the wound and with the flowing blood, seized him by the knees with his arms, even as he reeled and fell. Then the others rushed upon him, and Stutely struck again at another of the sheriff's men. But the steel cap glanced the blow, and though the blade bit deep, it did not kill. Meanwhile, the constable, fainting as he was, drew Stutely downward, and the others, seeing the yeoman hampered so, rushed upon him again, and one smote him a blow upon the crown, so that the blood ran down his face and blinded him. Then, staggering, he fell, and all sprang upon him, though he struggled so manfully that they could hardly hold him fast. Then they bound him with stout hempen cords, so that he could not move either hand or foot, and thus they overcame him. Robin Hood stood under the greenwood tree, thinking of Will Stutely, and how he might be faring, when suddenly he saw two of his stout yeomen come running down the forest path, and betwixt them ran buxom Macon of the Blue Boar. Then Robin's heart fell, for he knew they were the bearers of ill tidings. "Will Stutely hath been taken," cried they, when they had come to where he stood. "And is it thou that hast brought such doleful news?" said Robin to the less. "Aye, marry, for I saw it all," cried she, panting the hare pants when it has escaped the hounds. "And I fear he is wounded sore, for one smote him main shrewdly, aye the crown. They have bound him and taken him to Nottingham town, and ere I left the Blue Boar I heard that he should be hanged tomorrow day."
"He shall not be hanged tomorrow day," cried Robin. "Or if he be, full many a one shall gnaw the sod, and many shall have cause to cry, Alack a day."
And then he clasped his horn to his lips, and blew 3 blasts right loudly. And presently his good yeomen came running through the greenwood, until 70 bold blades were gathered around him. "Now hark you all," cried Robin. "Our dear companion Will Stutely hath been taken by that vile sheriff's men. Therefore doth it behoove us to take bow and brand in hand to bring him off again. For For I wot that we ought to risk life and limb for him, as he hath risked life and limb for us. Is it not so, my merry men all?" Then all cried, "Aye!" with a great voice. So the next day they all wended their way from Sherwood Forest, but by different paths, for it behooved them to be very crafty. So the band separated into parties of 2s and 3s, which were all to meet again in a tangled dell that lay near to Nottingham town. Then, when they had all gathered together at the place of meeting, Robin spoke to them thus: "Now we will lie here in ambush until we can get news, for it doth behoove us to be cunning and wary if we would bring our friend Will Stutely off from the sheriff's clutches." So they lay hidden a long time, until the sun stood high in the sky. The day was warm, and the dusty road was bare of travellers, except an aged palmer who walked slowly along the high road that led close beside the grey castle wall of Nottingham town. When Robin saw that no other wayfarer was within sight, he called young David of Doncaster, who was a shrewd man for his years, and said to him, "Now get thee forth, young David, and speak to yonder palmer that walks beside the town wall, for he hath come but now from Nottingham town, and may tell thee news of good Stutely perchance." So David strode forth, and when he came up to the pilgrim, he saluted him and said, "Good morrow, holy father, and canst thou tell me when Will Stutely will be hanged upon the gallows tree? I fain would not miss the sight, for I have come from afar to see so sturdy a rogue hanged."
"Now out upon thee, young man,"
cried the palmer, "that thou shouldest speak so, when a good stout man is to be hanged for nothing but guarding his own life." And he struck his staff upon the ground in anger. "Alas, say I, that this thing should be, for even this day toward evening, when the sun falleth low, he shall be hanged, 80 rods from the great town gate of Nottingham, where 3 roads meet. For there the sheriff sweareth he shall die as a warning to all outlaws in Nottinghamshire. But yet I say again, alas! For though Robin Hood and his band may be outlaws, yet he taketh only from the rich and the strong and the dishonest men. Well, there is not a poor widow nor a peasant with many children nigh to Sherwood, but has barley flour enough all the year long through him. It grieves my heart to see one as gallant as this Stutely die, for I have been a good Saxon yeoman in my day, ere I turned palmer. And well I know a stout hand, and one that smiteth shrewdly at a cruel Norman or a proud abbot with fat money bags. Had good Stutely's master but known how this man was compassed about with perils, perchance he might send succour to bring him out of the hands of his enemies." "Aye, marry, that is true," cried the young man. "If Robin and his men be nigh this place, I wot right well they will strive to bring him forth from his peril. But fare thee well, thou good old man, and believe me, if Will Stutely die, he shall be right well avenged." Then he turned and strode rapidly away. But the palmer looked after him, muttering, "I wot that youth is no country hind that hath come to see a good man die. Well, well, perchance Robin Hood is not so far away, but that there will be stout doings this day." So he went upon his way, muttering to himself. When David of Doncaster told Robin Hood what the palmer had said to him, Robin called the band around him and spoke to them thus: "Now let us get straight away into Nottingham town, and mix ourselves with the people there. But keep ye one another in sight, pressing as near the prisoner and his guards as ye can. When they come outside the walls, strike no man without need, for I would fain avoid bloodshed. But if ye do strike, strike hard, and see that there be no need to strike again. Then keep all together until we come again to Sherwood, and let no man leave his fellows. The sun was now in the western sky, when a bugle note sounded from the castle walls. Then all was bustle in Nottingham town, and crowds filled the streets, for all knew that the famous Will Stutely was to be hanged that day. Presently, the castle gates opened wide, and a great array of men at arms came forth with noise and clatter. The sheriff, all clad in shining mail of linked chain, riding at their head, in the midst of all the guard in a cart, with a halter about his neck, rode Will Stutely. His face was pale with his wound and with loss of blood, like the moon in broad daylight, and his fair hair was clotted in points upon his forehead, where the blood had hardened. When he came forth from the castle, he looked up, and he looked down. But though he saw some faces that showed pity, and some that showed friendliness, he saw none that he knew. Then his heart sank within him like a plummet of lead, but nevertheless he spoke up boldly. "Give a sword into my hand, Sir Sheriff," said he, "and wounded man though I be, I will fight thee and all thy men till life and strength be gone." "Nay, thou naughty varlet," quoth the sheriff, turning his head and looking right grimly upon Will Stutely. "Thou shalt have no sword, but shalt die a mean death, as beseemeth a vile thief like thee." "Then do not untie my hands, and I will fight thee and thy men with no weapon, but only my naked fists. I crave no weapon, but let me not be meanly hanged this day." Then the sheriff laughed aloud. "Why, how now?" quoth he. "Is thy proud stomach quailing? Shrive thyself, thou vile knave, for I mean that thou shalt hang this day, and that where three roads meet, so that all men shall see thee hang for carrion crows and daws to peck at." "O thou dastard heart!" cried Will Stutely, gnashing his teeth at the sheriff. "Thou coward hind! If ever my good master meet thee, thou shalt pay dearly for this day's work. He doth scorn thee, and so do all brave hearts. Knowest thou not that thou and thy name are jests upon the lips of every brave yeoman? Such a one as thou art, thou wretched craven, will never be able to subdue bold Robin Hood." "Ha!" cried the sheriff in a rage. "Is it even so? Am I a jest with thy master, as thou callest him? Now I will make a jest of thee, and a sorry jest withal, for I will quarter thee limb from limb, after thou art hanged." Then he spurred his horse forward, and said no more to Stutely. At last they came to the great town gate, through which Stutely saw the fair country beyond, with hills and dales all clothed in verdure, and far away the dusky line of Sherwood skirts. Then, when he saw the slanting sunlight lying on field and fallow, shining redly here and there on cot and farmhouse, and when he heard the sweet birds singing their vespers, and the sheep bleating upon the hillside, "Bah!" and beheld the swallows flying in the bright air, there came a great fullness to his heart, so that all things blurred to his sight through salt tears, and he bowed his head lest the folk should think him unmanly when they saw the tears in his eyes. Thus he kept his head bowed till they had passed through the gate, and were outside the walls of the town. But when he looked up again, he felt his heart leap within him, and then stand still for pure joy, for he saw the face of one of his own dear companions of Mary Sherwood. Then, glancing quickly around, he saw well-known faces upon all sides of him, crowding closely upon the men-at-arms who were guarding him. Then of a sudden the blood sprang to his cheeks, for he saw for a moment his own good master in the press, and seeing him knew that Robin Hood and all his band were there. Yet betwixt him and them was a line of men-at-arms. "Now stand back," cried the sheriff in a mighty voice, for the crowd pressed around on all sides. "What mean ye, varlets, that ye push upon us so? Stand back, I say." Then came a bustle and a noise, and one strove to push between the men-at-arms so as to reach the cart, and Stutely saw that it was Little John that made all the stir. "Now stand thou back," cried one of the men-at-arms, whom Little John pushed with his elbow. "Now stand thou back thine own self," quoth Little John, and straightway smote the man a buffet beside his head that felled him as a butcher fells an ox, and then he leaped to the cart where Stutely sat. I pray thee take leave of thy friends ere thou diest, Will," quoth he, "or maybe I will die with thee if thou must die, for I could never have better company." Then with one stroke he cut the bonds that bound the other man's arms and legs, and Stutely leaped straight away from the cart. "Now as I live," cried the sheriff, "yon varlet I know right well is a sturdy rebel. Take him, I bid you all, and let him not go." So saying, he spurred his horse upon Little John, and rising in his stirrups smote with might and main. But Little John ducked quickly underneath the horse's belly, and the blow whistled harmlessly over his head. Nay, good Sir Sheriff," he cried, leaping up again when the blow had passed. I must then borrow thy most worshipful sword." Thereupon he twitched the weapon deftly from out the sheriff's hand. "Here, Stutely," he cried, "the sheriff hath lent thee his sword. Back to back with me, man, and defend thyself, for help is nigh." "Down with them!" bellowed the sheriff in a voice like an angry bull, and he spurred his horse upon the two who now stood back to back, forgetting in his rage that he had no weapon with which to defend himself. "Stand back, sheriff!" cried Little John. And even as he spoke, a bugle horn sounded shrilly, and a cloth-yard shaft whistled within an inch of the sheriff's head. Then came a swaying hither and thither, and oaths, cries, and groans, and clashing of steel. Cling, cling, oh, cling, cling, cling. And swords flashed in the setting sun, and a score of arrows whistled through the air. And some cried, "Help, help!" and some, "A rescue, a rescue!" "Treason!" cried the sheriff in a loud voice. Bear back, else we be all dead men." Thereupon he reined his horse backward through the thickest of the crowd. Now Robin Hood and his band might have slain half of the sheriff's men had they desired to do so, but they let them push out of the press and get them gone, only sending a bunch of arrows after them to hurry them in their flight. "Oh, stay!" shouted Will Stutely after the sheriff. "Thou wilt never catch bold Robin Hood if thou dost not stand to meet him face to face." But the sheriff, bowing along his horse's back, made no answer, but only spurred the faster. Then Will Stutely turned to Little John and looked him in the face, till the tears ran down from his eyes, and he wept aloud, and kissing his friend's cheeks, "Oh, Little John," quoth he, "mine own true friend, and he that I love better than man or woman in all the world besides. Little did I reckon to see thy face this day, or to meet thee this side paradise." Little John could make no answer, but wept also. Then Robin Hood gathered his band together in a close rank, with Will Stutely in the midst, and thus they moved slowly away towards Sherwood, and were gone, as a storm cloud moves away from the spot where a tempest has swept the land. But they left 10 of the sheriff's men lying along the ground wounded, some more, some less, yet no one knew who smote them down. Thus the sheriff of Nottingham tried thrice to take Robin Hood, and failed each time. And the last time he was frightened, for he felt how near he had come to losing his life. So he said, "These men fear neither God nor man, nor king's officers. I would sooner lose mine office than my life, so I will trouble them no more." So he kept close within his castle for many a day, and dared not show his face outside his own household. And all the time he was gloomy, and would speak to no one, for he was ashamed of what had happened that day.